Recording in progress.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the NARALO Post ICANN80 Readout on Monday, the 22nd of July, 2024. In the interest of time, we will not do a roll call, but all attendees' names will be noted on the Wiki agenda page after today's meeting. We have received no apologies. From staff today, we currently have Heidi Ulrich, Laurent Ferrali, Sylvia Vavanko, Josie McGinty, Niala Saris, and myself, Michelle Desmater, on call management. A kind reminder to please state your names every time you speak for transcription purposes. For those presenting today, we do encourage you to use your camera, if at all possible, when presenting to make it a little more personal. Thank you so much, and I will hand the meeting back over to Greg Shatan, Chair of NARALO.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, everyone, for being here. This is, I think, a great panel, so I won't take too much time with introductory remarks. We'll be going over the high points and some other points of the ICANN80 meeting in Kigali, Rwanda, which took place June 10th through 13th. We have a whole bunch of really good speakers here. So this was one of the policy forum meetings. So it was one of the smaller meetings where a lot of policy discussions took place, and relatively few kind of talking head type of conversations. And that's reflected in what you'll be hearing today. So I'm going to turn to Jim Galvin, ICANN org board member, one of the longest serving members ever of the SAC, if I am correct, at least 22 years, and also has a day job as well. So, Jim, if you're ready, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Greg. My pleasure. James Galvin, for the record. Yes, you're correct. I am SAC's liaison to the ICANN board. And although I'm not a founding member, I am the first other member of SAC. And so I've just been around ICANN for a long time. I am today presenting on behalf of Leon Sanchez. I offer his apologies to the group here. He is normally the one who would do this presentation, but he is enjoying some much deserved opportunity to be with his family, so some time off and vacation time. What I thought I would do is run through, highlight a few key resolutions from the last couple of board meetings that took place, and then highlight some topics that were present during the board workshop, which took place immediately prior to ICANN80. So jumping to the resolutions, I should first say, for your information and for the record, that these resolutions I'm going to highlight are all related to next round issues. My day job and employer is Identity Digital. And so as a registry operator and registry service provider, I ordinarily, in agreement, with the board, of course, recuse myself from all the detailed discussions regarding these issues. Nonetheless, these are all resolutions. That notwithstanding, these are resolutions that have been discussed and approved and actually published by the board. And so I'm going to highlight them here. So the first one is about the handling of registry commitments that restrict content. And the board has simply reaffirmed the position it has held for quite some time in all of this, that it will exclude from the next round any registry voluntary commitments or other registry commitments that restrict content in gTLDs. As we should all know, not in any way examining content is not permitted by the ICANN bylaws. And so we haven't been able to get around that. So we're continuing in that respect. In addition, we had some discussion about a number of supplemental recommendations to the original sub-pro activities. So there was a couple of supplemental recommendations related to applicant support and limiting challenges and appeals, which was approved by the board. On the applicant support side, it's just about recognizing that obviously ICANN is going to provide an applicant support program. And so we had some discussion and some clarity added to the fact that that support should include a set of resources beyond just the application fee. So there's some discussion and clarity around that. And with limited challenges and appeals, it again is similar. The sub-pro recommendations were pretty clear about what they wanted. In the implementation phase, there's just some clarity around limited challenges and appeals applying when extended evaluation is not present and is not part of the process. So just making that clear. And the board did expressly reject the terms and conditions proposal. And as a result of some supplemental recommendations, they came around to wanting to just not do that it was not consistent with ICANN's bylaws and other rules and regulations. So for details, folks can certainly look at those documents and the rationale that's there. There's also a resolution about ICANN 77's GAC communique regarding avoiding auctions. The issue is that the board has been dealing and wrestling with the fact that it seems that the GAC consensus advice is in conflict with one of the recommendations in sub-pro, and the board has decided that it's going to continue on the side of the sub-pro recommendations, which it has accepted. And so, in fact, what the resolution really does is the board is initiating the formal board GAC bylaws consultation process, which is mandated by the bylaws whenever the board is not going to take a GAC consensus advice item. So that's just a notification really to the community and to the GAC that is formally going to take place. The only other thing that I'll mention from the list of resolutions in the last couple of meetings is that the board approved the implementation of the RSP evaluation program, and in fact approved a fee of $92,000 US for folks who are going to engage in that evaluation, with the potential for refunds if the number of participants and fees paid, warrants that. So that'll be decided later as the program gets underway and we see what that turns into. So I'm going to pause there with respect to the resolutions before I jump into mentioning a few key topics from the workshop, if that's okay, Greg, or would you rather I do the workshop, see if there's any questions?
If we have any questions, people could put a hand up, but I don't see any hands up. So why don't you go ahead with the workshop and we can deal with any more questions at the end. Okay. So quickly, 4 items here from the workshop. The board Organizational Effectiveness Committee had some discussion about non-com rebalancing and unaffiliated directors. I know that's the topic that is around and still visible in the community and such. That's still a work in progress, even at the board level, but just wanted to mention that we are trying to move that forward. And make some progress there. So that's a good thing. Hopefully we will see something substantive coming out of the next workshop in September. That at least is the ideal goal. The board is also having some general discussions about ODPs. We've done 2 significant ODPs along the way here in the recent past. And the board was having some discussion about what we've learned from having done them. The good things about them. I think that we have learned that there is value in understanding implementation impact and considerations. So the real question here is, how can we better integrate the ODP process and those lessons
into our overall processes, notably the PDP process, if you will. How can we better integrate those things to streamline and learn things sooner rather than later? I mention this because the action out of this is there will be a survey forthcoming soon to continue the dialogue with the community. We'd really like to understand, from the community, what your views are, your opinions are of what you've learned and what you think would work going forward as far as how to make use of these things. The ODPs are a fairly heavyweight process, or at least they have been, the two that we've done. So, the question is, along with PDPs, how do we streamline this and better integrate it with what we're doing? I'll also mention the Strategic Planning Committee certainly had a significant workshop opportunity with the full board. They've actually already met a couple of times since that workshop. And you should expect that the 5-year strategic plan and operating plan are soon going to be released, formally for public comment. There isn't anything here that you honestly haven't seen already. There have already been a couple of webinars which describe the path and the principal elements of the 5-year strategic plan, the new plan. So hopefully the public comment period will just be putting a final pin in the discussions and taking on board everything that we've learned so far, and hopefully that will not engender any significant and material response from the community, although obviously we're always interested in what people have to say. And lastly, what I'll mention is RDRS. We are now 6 months into the RDRS system pilot period. The board is actively conducting a 6-month review. I'm sure you recall that was intended to be a 2-year pilot. And, now we're beginning to look at what is success for RDRS. There were success criteria defined as part of launching the pilot. These were agreed between the GNSO and the board and the GNSO small team. So we do have that. But now the question is, does that data tell us anything? What are we learning? What does that inform for next steps? We're really looking to see if there's any trends. And maybe we need to look for some change in metrics because we're not really learning what we need to know. So that's kind of a work in progress. Really just wanted to report out that we are actively trying to figure out how to make RDRS a success and what that means. So, can we learn something from it? And obviously, if anyone has any thoughts or opinions about that, would love to have some insights offered to the board and comments in general. People should say things about what they are seeing in the 6 months of statistics that have been and metrics that have been published. Would be very good to hear that and understand it. The last thing would just be as an additional topic. The board is busy selecting its liaisons for the pilot holistic review. So that'll complete in its ordinary process. So we expect to have that soon. And that's it for me, Greg.
Thank you, Jim. I think let's see if there are any questions. While it wasn't, a board thing per se, there was a pretty exciting announcement from the chair of the board, Tripti Sinha, about the future leadership of ICANN. Which is also, I think, worth mentioning, that Curtis Lundquist has been officially chosen as the next ICANN president and CEO. He'll be starting, I think, toward the end of the year. He is currently with Links, the London Internet Exchange. And a lot of people seem to know and like Curtis. And we're looking forward to having him aboard. Any questions for James Galvin?
While we're waiting for hands,
Seeing
I'll
none,
just
I thank you, James, for joining us. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to note Curtis's first day is December 4th officially at the moment. And yes, that was big news at ICANN 80. Getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, it'll be big news at ICANN 81 too. And maybe he'll even, visit us in Istanbul, uh, hopefully. Um, so just giving a second for any hands. Not seeing anyone handing. I will or putting up a hand. We can move on to our next item. Thank you again, Jim, for uh, giving this very packed and impactful report on the board activities in and around ICANN 81. ICANN 80. Now you've got me doing it. Next person on the list is me. So I'm just going to quickly go over um, the meetings that took place within the at-large and ALAC group at ICANN 80. Since this was a policy forum, we had somewhat fewer meetings that were ALAC or at-large centric, because the idea of the policy forum is to participate in the making and reviewing and refining of policy. And so that doesn't take place as such in the at-large room. Thank you, James. I'll let you go, and we'll look forward to having you around again, perhaps. Although, of course, Leon is our at-large guy. But in any case, thanks again. So we had a variety of different meetings that did take place. Given that we were in Kigali, Rwanda, there were a number of meetings that took place that directly involved Africa. So you'll see the Monday agenda is up there. So first there was the ALAC roundtable. ALAC is the African regional at-large organization. The roundtable covered enhancing the internet infrastructure in Africa. And then the second ALAC item, well, I think it's important to mention Nee Kanar, who is the called the grandfather or the father of the internet in Africa, was speaking, and obviously an honor to have him involved. Next, another ALAC session, building a multilingual internet, obviously something that's important in Africa with so many languages, but also in the rest of the world. The opportunities and challenges with a presentation by Dr. Jabero Matagoro and many discussants. You'll see them all up there. I think quite a great group there. And then there was an ALAC networking event by invitation only. And what happens in a networking event stays in a networking event. So I'm sure it was fun. At-large leadership welcome session was the next. This was really the first of the at-large events and ALAC events, where we went over talking points. We went over what we expected to be dealing with, and the like. This, of course, was led by our fearless leader, Jonathan Zuck. Also, Jonathan introduced the first version of the at-large campaign playbook for outreach and engagement, fun and games. Next, after that, we had sort of if we go to Tuesday, sort of a bilateral or trilateral meeting, at-large meeting with the ICANN fellows and the ICANN Next Gen. So we can hear more about them. They can hear more about us. Quite a number of people who start out in fellows and Next Gen come to us in at-large, and sometimes end up on ALAC as well, the At-Large Advisory Council. After that, we had, and we'll be hearing more about this separately, at-large collaboration in the new gTLD program outreach and engagement plan. So I'll say no more about that because we are going to hear about that separately. Then we had two more bilateral meetings. ALAC met with the SSAC, the Security and Stability Advisory Committee, and also with the GAC, the Government Advisory Committee, covering quite a number of topics. All of these, the agendas are available on the ICANN website. Maybe we can put the link in the chat where we can get the ALAC meeting list. After that, there was the at-large cross-RDRS coordination session, which is where the chairs of the 5 regional at-large organizations, which includes NARALO, ALAC, LACRALO, and AP RALO, and your RALO, of course. The RALOs are the regional at-large organizations, and we plot and plan amongst ourselves to see how we can help work across different RALOs and support each other. And the next were a couple more Afrocentric meetings, if you will, the joint AFRALO and ICANN meeting, and also the Africa space, which is a space in which whatever needs to be discussed around what's going on in that area relating to ICANN, the internet, etc. I think specifically there was findings from the Africa domain name industry study that were provided there, and also an update on various projects. After that was an at-large ISOC chapter roundtable, which is sort of also a bilateral meeting. A number of the at-large structures, the groups that together make up most of the membership, or a lot of the membership of at-large. Many of them are ISOC chapters, the Internet Society chapters, and the idea here was to discuss how to utilize the strengths of of those 2 organizations together, and the various supports and opportunities that can be used to be more effective in both spaces. This had never happened before in my time. I think there have been some meetings a number of years ago like this, so it was very good to have this sort of discussion. Of course, it was open to everyone, so we had people who were not necessarily in ISOC ALSs who were participating. And that brings us pretty much to the last item, which was of course, the at-large leadership wrap-up session. Again, led by fearless leader Jonathan Zuck, where we went over the highlights of what just happened, not unlike this. And there were various reports from working groups and liaisons and the like. And I should mention, of course, that even with this list of many meetings, and also everything else that's being covered on this NARALO, or on this readout, there are many meetings at the ICANN80 that are not being specifically mentioned here. So you can go to the ICANN80 website and find presentations and agendas and other things there if you're still looking for more ICANN info after this readout. So that is, in a nutshell, the meetings that took place, with ALAC or at-large, the at-large community at ICANN80. To dig a little bit deeper on a couple of them, I'll be turning first to Alan Greenberg, who will give us a report on the ALAC joint meeting with the GAC. Over to you, Al.
Thank you very much. I've been given 3 minutes to talk about a very substantive meeting, so I think I'll probably go over, but I'll try to not go over too much. The first slide,
you can have
please.
5.
Well, thank you. All right. There were a number of topics on the agenda, although we also went far and wide on some other issues. The first issue we talked about was the new gTLD program contention resolution. Now, contention resolution is the process by which, if you have multiple applications for the same string or for similar strings, how do you decide who gets it? In the last round, there was the conceptual process by which we encourage joint ventures, that is, different applicants coming together for a unified application. That didn't actually happen. If there were multiple applications that could not be resolved other ways, and they weren't, then in theory they went to auction. Many of them went to what was called the ICANN auction of last resort, and the proceeds went into what is now the grant program, and there were several $100 million that went into that. But many contentions were resolved by private auctions. In a private auction, the various potential applicants or the applicants bid on it, and whoever won the bid, the resultant amount of money was then divided among the other applicants. So essentially, you could apply for a TLD. It would cost you a few $100,000 plus some effort, and you might end up walking away with $20 million. Because you lost the auction, but you made money on it. It became clear that there were many applicants who were benefiting very substantially, not from having a TLD, but from losing an auction. And for a whole number of reasons, that was viewed as something which was not supportive of the ICANN image of supporting an open internet. And there was significant worry that this coming rounds, people would explicitly apply not to run a TLD, but to hope to benefit from the losing an auction. So the issue is a very important one from an ALAC perspective. And both the ALAC and the GAC have strongly issued statements and informal advice to the board that private auctions, not be allowed at all. The board has yet to respond to those advice, but the ALAC and the GAC have worked closely together on this, and hopefully we'll see the results of that. How the auctions get held, the auction of last resort, is still an issue to be decided. Some people in the ALAC, including the chair, are strongly supporting the concept of a sealed bid second price auction. That's an auction where when you apply for the TLD, you say how much you're willing to pay for it. And the price is set. There's no bidding in the auction after that. And once it is determined that there is contention, that whoever bid the highest wins, but they only pay the price of the second highest bid. So it's an interesting concept that addresses some problems, but that's not something the GAC is supporting at this point. But there was a good discussion on it. Next slide, please. The other discussion that took up a lot of the time at the meeting was the applicant support program. That is the program by which applicants from disadvantaged areas can get some of their fee, a significant part of their application fee is waived, and in addition, there'll be other services that will be provided to ensure that they can participate in this program, and that we will have TLDs that are not just from the developed world and the developed countries. There were a number of issues that we talked about at length. One is awareness. How do we make people know about this program? How do we give them enough advance notice? And what do we do, and we being specifically the ALAC and the GAC, to make sure that the message gets out? There was a lot of discussion of past and future cooperative work in this area between the GAC and the ALAC, not only at ICANN meetings, but intersessionally. And there was also a substantive discussion on what to do if there are more successful applicants than there is money. And it had been proposed at one point by staff that we use a first come, first serve. That is, if we have enough money for 45 applicants, which is what we expect, and we have 60 applicants, then the first 45 get it, and the last 15 who come in later simply are out in the cold. There was a very strong feeling that that is not the way to go, that applicants should not be judged based on how quickly they can get their application in, but based on the qualities of the application itself. And the current intention from the board seems to be that if indeed there are more applicants and there's funds, they will make a best efforts attempt to find more money. And clearly, it will depend on exactly what the numbers are. So it looks like the position taken by the GAC and the ALAC that first come first serve is a bad idea will not go forward in any case. Next slide. And that's a link to the session itself, including the full Zoom session. And I strongly recommend that if any of you have an interest in the areas I've talked about, that you go and listen to the session. It is worthwhile, and it does show a level of cooperation and work between the ALAC and the GAC, which a lot of us talked about for decades, but is now actually happening, and that's very, very encouraging. So thank you. And back to you, Greg, or whoever's running this.
It's me. Thank you, Alan. You managed to get that in quite succinctly. So without further ado, we're going to hear about the at-large collaboration and in the new gTLD program outreach and engagement plan. And we have not one, but two presenters for this particular item. We have Bob Ochieng, who is the ICANN org Senior Director for new GLT subsequent procedures, or new GLT next round, since we've now decided it is next and it's a round as opposed to merely subsequent and a procedure. And we also have Claire Craig, who is the Vice Chair of ALAC. So I'll turn this over to Bob and Claire.
Well, thank you, Greg. I guess I'll go first. Claire, you want to go first?
Hi, Bob. Thanks. No, you go first, and I'll follow after you. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. And I know we don't have a lot of time here, so I'll take a few minutes just to give you a debrief of what we did at ICANN80. Specifically our discussions with the ALAC and our presentation at the ALAC session, out of the invitation to really present specifically on our plans on outreach and engagement on the next round, but also specifically explore how can we collaborate and partner with the network of RALOs as we try and deepen our reach for potential applicants. But probably maybe just to underscore, from the onset that if you look at recommendation 13.2, and I know a number of you are familiar with the sub-final recommendations, it envisions really creating early awareness, with as many potential applicants as possible. So it envisions very broad campaign to really reach out globally, if you may, to every potential applicant for the next round. And you also know that there are three main components within this program that we, in totality call the next round. In there, you have ASP, which we have talked about variously, and Alan was spot on in his update. But also we have RSP. And some of these are actually projects that are opening, or milestones that we are opening earlier on before the actual round is opened. And I know that, all of us here are aware that ASP is projected to open in November or Q4 of this year, and so is RSP. as James mentioned in his earlier update, that the fee for RSP is actually now confirmed and approved by the board. And therefore, RSP is also set for November this year. So in the intervening time, between now and the launch of RSP and ASP, there is a great expectation on the org, but also from us, the community and constituencies, on outreach and awareness to ensure that we bring in potential applicants and the diversity as we can get to apply for these elements of the program. And I want to zero in on ASP because this has been going through a lot of discussion, as Alan already highlighted, between ALAC and the GAC, of course, between the GAC and the board. And I'm sure we are aware about the GAC communique that came out of ICANN80 as to the elements that touch on ASP and the stress that the GAC is putting on ensuring that the org is doing the right thing to ensure that, we achieve diversity as far as possible and engage the underserved regions so that we actually get applications from these underserved regions. So we had a session with ALAC, I think on the 11th or the 12th, and we discussed what plans we have as an org in terms of trying to meet the expectations from engagement and awareness to ensure that we live up to the expectations of achieving diversity as expected for ASP and also by extension RSP. For these are the programs that are actually launching in November this year. Now, out of this, there has been a number of developments. As you know, we have taken a step to further refine our overall engagement approach that was published. And now we are working with our global stakeholder team that and I'm happy that Naila is here, to really now zero in on this expected target audiences as far as ASP is concerned. For example, that ASP is looking at potential NGOs, underserved voices or social enterprises, and communities or indigenous communities, small and medium enterprises, and also IGOs. Now, the assignment or the task is how to identify these categories of potential applicants for ASP across the underserved regions. And this is underserved in the sense that they're not, our typical ICANN audiences, and yet they could be potential applicants for ASP. So the exercise that is going on now, especially in collaboration with our GSC team, is really to zero in on these categories envisioned by the GGP under NGOs, IGOs, indigenous communities, not-for-profit organizations, social enterprises, and identify them in the respective regions and really come up with mechanisms and channels through which we can actually reach out to them. And therefore, we are looking at consolidating actual names, actual contacts internally that we can actually rely on working together with you as the at-large community to help us reach out to these communities. This is also informed by lessons learned from the last time. In 2012, three major highlights as in terms of feedback were realized on how the engagement and communications were affected. First of all, it was evident that there was not enough time between the point that the organ rolled out our engagement efforts and the application deadlines. The amount of information or the information available at that time might not have been complete enough For example, there was information about the fees, but not what happens after an applicant was successful. And therefore, some of these applications realized that there were additional responsibilities and fees after they had already applied, and later on blamed the org for lack of complete information or complete transparency on what it takes to run a TLD. So the completeness of the information that we are disseminating is as critical as disseminating that information in time. Of course, the other element was about the fees itself, which is where the ASP comes handy. So we really want to leverage your network as RALOs to support our engagement and awareness in your respective regions, to help us reach out to these categories of potential applicants as envisioned by the GGP report. These are NGOs, these are social enterprises, these are indigenous communities, these are small and medium enterprises in your regions that you feel are potential. And what we are putting together in parallel is a toolkit for you to help you with the information that you need for ASP, for RSP, for the next round, so that you can leverage that to really discuss with them and report back to us for those that show interest. And therefore, we hope that between now and November, working together with you and our GSE network, that we can partner to really ensure that we reach out as much as possible as envisioned by the final report. So this is work in progress, and just to highlight that towards this effect, we have put together a webinar on July 31st of this month, and then Naila will be circulating that announcement, or some of you have seen it already, to talk about ASP in detail, and use that opportunity to answer as many questions that you could have on the ASP project. And I think I'll stop it there in the interest of time. Thank you very much, and happy to take questions.
Hi. Well, I'll just follow on from here. Thanks, Bob. As both, sorry, are you hearing me? As both Bob and
Yes, you sound great.
Great. As Bob and Alan said, one of the key issues of this initiative is awareness. And what we, in our discussion, this is ALAC's discussion with the comms team, we stress the importance that, the ASP, the Applicant Support Program, and the new gTLD program go hand in hand. So you cannot separate it. The two of them, any program that we're looking at to disseminate to our underserved regions where this needs to have attention, we need to take into consideration both of these aspects. So the things that we discussed with that team was really, as Bob also spoke to, and here it is, I'm glad that we're speaking to NARALO, this is where the RALOs play an important role in the outreach and engagement, as well as with Naila being here, the GSE team also has to work to make this thing happen in a way that the RALO is working with the GSE to reach those underserved communities, to reach the people who need to have the information to be able to make informed decision as for the applicant support program. Now, one of the things that we stressed with the comms team was the fact that we are supposed to be in the period now of outreach and engagement. We are supposed to be building awareness at this point in time, but we really do not yet have the material that's needed for our RALOs to be able to go out there and make have that kind of engagement with the communities that need to have the information. So it's really important that that information becomes available as quickly as possible. Some of the things that we suggested, one of the things actually that we suggested was the need for case studies, because each community may have different needs and different understandings. And some of them may not even understand, the importance or how they can benefit in this this next round. Why is it important for them to apply? Why should they go after certain things? And so some of that kind of engagement is needed. So we also, and as Alan spoke about the very engaging session at the GAC, we also felt that there was need for ALAC and GAC to possibly work together, even the GAC working at, the RDRS in the regions, working with their different governments to help to disseminate this kind of awareness so that the persons who need to have the information to do what is required. So in the interest of time, I wouldn't say more than that, but basically the time is now. We really need to get our act together in terms of beginning our outreach and engagement if we need to reach the communities who need to have the information so that we get the numbers that we're looking for. We're talking about 45 applicants possibly, but what are we doing at this point in time to get those kinds of applicants? And do they also, we still have no information about the cost and those things. We have no fixed timeline for the start. And those are some of the communication issues that we really need to work on and get out there. So I'm hoping that in the webinar on the 31st of July, a lot more of that information will be forthcoming so that we can work closely with our RALOs to begin this, to get this communication and this awareness session up and running. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this NARALO readout.
Thank you, Claire. The pleasure to have you, and thank you, Bob, as well. Very informative. We'll see what happens in this space. Never a dull moment. Without taking any further time, we'll go right over to Jeff Neuman, who is first of our hot topics, and discussing the new gTLD program next round implementation review update and other related stuff. So without further ado, Jeff Neuman. Jeff, you're muted. I guess this is further ado. Jeff, can you come off mute?
Jeff, we're not able to hear you. You might have to reestablish your audio if you're having.
Okay, I think I got it. Sorry, guys.
There you.
So
okay.
The issue was I had it on full screen, and then because something was wrong with, anyway, all fixed. You would think after how many years we would have this fixed out. Okay, so you have the slides up. The good thing about going last or last on the new gTLD stuff, at least, is that a lot of it was covered before. So I don't want to cover again what's already been covered. So we can, there we go. I can see it now. So I'll skip through a bunch of this stuff. We can just go to the next slide. Essentially, I'm going to cover, like I think Jim, Galvin did, and some others. There were a lot of things that happened pre-ICANN 80 in the pre-ICANN 80 sessions, as well as the regular sessions, and since ICANN 80. I had to go back, if you want to go to the next slide, I had to go back and look because the issues on new gTLDs have been moving forward a lot even since ICANN 80. I had to go back and put us in the same position as we were in prior to ICANN 80. So if you go to the next slide. So in the session that was just prior to ICANN 80, the prep session, we were presented with a couple slides that I've repurposed here. They're ICANN slides. on the status. And I don't need to go through those, but that's just kind of the timeline overall that's expected. Hard to read on this small screen, so we could just kind of cut ahead. But essentially, it was a snapshot in time that was presented by ICANN as to where we are on the next round in implementation. If we could just go forward here. So you can see on this one, this is the timeline to completing the guidebook. Now, the ICANN guidebook is essentially the RFP, the request for proposals that applicants will fill out when they apply for the new gTLD. Contains all of the rules, examples, everything about the dispute processes. Pretty much every phase is described in this guidebook. And we've already had one public comment period on some of the sections of the guidebook. We're looking to have a second public comment period on additional areas of the guidebook in September, and another one in December, with the goal, and I'll knock on wood, that we have the final applicant guidebook, the final public comment and the guidebook published around May, board approval in December 2025, and then the published at that point in time. Sorry about that. I'm getting my words mixed up here. We can go on to the next one. So this just goes over, and I'm not going to go over any detail because of lack of time. This is just the subjects that were out for the first public comment period that ended in March. There were a number of comments that were received, a summary report, and we've been discussing in the implementation review team, which is what IRT stands for. We've been discussing a number of these areas that had applicant comments, just to make sure to make the changes reflecting the comments that we received. And so that's some of the work that's been going on now. If you go to the next one, public comment 2, which will start hopefully in September, we'll cover these particular subjects. A lot of these have either already been discussed by the IRT, and some of that is ongoing, and we should be, knock on wood, hopefully done with these subjects in the IRT shortly, so that we can have the public comment period on these specific sections of the guidebook starting in September. Now, I will put an asterisk here because there's also going to be a public comment period if it hasn't started already today. My understanding is either today or tomorrow there'll be a limited public comment period on the applicant support program terms and conditions, and the RSP, the registry service provider terms and conditions. I guess I should have put terms and conditions, those words, in that asterisk. So these are the terms and conditions that each applicant, let's say each registry service provider, will have to agree to as part of the RSP program, and each applicant for the applicant support program will need to agree to. This doesn't have everything. Most of the conditions, especially for the applicant support, are in the applicant support handbook. That's that has been out for comment and is close to being finalized, if not should be done in the next couple of weeks or month or so that we can get the program started on time. These are mostly the legal terms and conditions, and to be honest, the implementation review team has seen the terms and conditions, but has had very limited opportunity to make any comments. This special public comment period that is supposed to start this week will likely have comments from the implementation review team as well, because I think we're all kind of being given this around the same time. You want to jump to the next slide? And public comment 3, which again will likely start in December or January of next year, will cover these topics that the implementation review team are discussing, including auctions, which have been mentioned several times on here, the appeal mechanism, which Jim mentioned, and as well as things like name collision, metrics, community applications. And I'll get a little bit into the voluntary commitments in one of the subsequent slides. So we can go to the next one. Oh, one thing before we get on to the sessions, themselves at ICANN80. This is important. A new website has been launched by ICANN just devoted to the new gTLD program. And so it's different than the last round. In the last round, we used something like newgtlds.icann.org. Now we're using newgtldprogram.icann.org. So make sure you go to that site, not to the old new GTLD site, because that one has not been updated. There's still some valuable information there, so I've been encouraging them not to just, forward that site onto this one. But at some point, I'm sure that this will be the main and only site with new gTLD stuff on it. Do you want to go to the next slide? Maybe. Okay, so on the applicant support program, as I don't want to go over too much in terms of things that have already been covered, but I think the issue, I think that I hadn't heard discussed in this call, is we're talking about reducing the application between 75 and 85%, which still leaves 15 to 25% to be covered by an applicant that receives support. And in a future slide, we'll talk about some of the discussions that have been taking place with respect to price, and then you kind of do the math backwards as to what 75 or 85% will be. It's also important to note that the applicant support program will not just cover fees, but it's supposed to cover, and this was sort of covered by Bob and Claire, it's going to cover more things like how to run the TLD and more of a knowledge base, not just the fees covering it, because after all, you could have all your fees paid for, and that would be great, but that doesn't mean that on day one you'll understand or know how to launch a TLD and how to do everything in compliance with ICANN policies and how to use the registrar channel and so many other things that are really important to have a good understanding of when you become a registry. So I think we can go to the next slide, which is on the RSP provider. So to take a small step back, in the last round, each technical provider included their application with the main application for the string. So in other words, I used to work for a company called Newstar. Newstar operated a number of registries before the last round and became a technical provider or a registry service provider for a number of new applications. In fact, there were 350 applications that included Newstar's technology as the back-end support. But in the last round, Newstar's proposal, or each applicant's proposal, had to be reviewed on its own, and therefore the same technical solution was reviewed 350 separate times, which was obviously, a drain on costs, and it was hard to keep results consistent when you had different evaluators, and it was really unnecessary because once you evaluate them once, why would anything change with subsequent evaluations if you're just proposing the same thing? That's really the point of this RSP program, is to evaluate RSPs, registry service providers, once, and then when an applicant comes forward to apply for a particular string, they could just say, I'm using a particular pre-evaluated RSP, and that wouldn't, again, have to be evaluated if you're not suggesting anything new from a technical perspective. So that timeline, which you heard was approved by the board along with the costs, is set to open up as early as November of this year, and the window will close around May so that all of the pre-evaluation results can be out by the end of 2025, if not earlier, so that applicants, when they do apply, and the general application window is still hovering around April 2026, applicants will have about 6 months or so to know which providers have been approved, or I should say pre-evaluated, and therefore which RSPs they can talk to about supporting their applications. So I want to go to the next slide. Okay, and one more. So there are a number of sessions at ICANN80 all of them really to do with the implementation, or all the ones I'll talk about will focus on the implementation review team sessions. That's the team that's now trying to come up with how to, it's under ICANN supervision, right? Because ICANN is the one that implements the new gTLD program, but has participants from the entire community. So there's, Alan is definitely someone who participates a lot. Greg as well. And a lot of people from the at-large and ALAC participate, not just from the NARALO region, but from all of the regions. So I think, if this is something that interests you, it's an open group, so you can pretty much sign up when you want. So the first session, there were 3 sessions. The first one was supposed to focus on both application fees and predictability, but we really ended up focusing on 100% on application fees. And I want everyone to think about this because, most people were kind of surprised with how high the application fees are proposed to be. Now, remember, in 2012, the application fees were $185,000, which seemed like a lot to a lot of people, but that also included all of the technical evaluation. Right now, we're talking about the range that ICANN has provided is between $208,000 and $293,000, and that doesn't include the technical evaluation, which are paid by hopefully the RSPs, but that, as you heard, could be as much as $92,000 if there are no refunds. And the reason I bring this up is not just because those seeking applicant support, if you take 75% of even the lower one of $200,000, you're still asking for a fairly large commitment from an applicant that receives applicant support. So, it's great that we're giving them let's say 75% off, but 25% of $293,000 is a lot of money. And not just that, the other thing we need to think about is, I'll call them sort of the middle class of registries. So most applicants, just like most organizations and businesses or even nonprofit organizations themselves, they don't fit into the top tier of, having huge budgets that, it'll cost you, that you could afford to pay $293,000 for an application, right? And it'd be great for those 45 or so or 50 or so applicants that get applicant support. But what about everyone else that, has to apply? And we're really talking about a lot of money. On the one hand, we really want a lot of applicants in this next round, but I just don't see how that's going to be possible if, to get a good diversity of applicants, if the costs are going to be $293,000. So I think this is something that certainly should be of concern to ALAC. And again, like I said, not just for the few applicants that are going to qualify for applicant supports, but pretty much for everybody else. If you want more information on that, ICANN did a justification presentation. They did a presentation which is linked. It's kind of a long link, so I didn't put the link separately. But if you click on that link when you get a copy of the presentation, you can see some more of what ICANN presented. The second session focused on bid credits. So as part of applicant support, one of the recommendations from the SubPro working group that was adopted by the board was the notion of essentially providing some form of applicant support in an auction, in a contention set that goes to an auction of last resort if there's, like I said, if there's contention. What that means is, so think about a dot whatever, and now you have an applicant where one of the applicant, or you have contention between an applicant that gets applicant support and you have another applicant that did not get applicant support, but let's say they have a substantial amount of resources. The question is, how can an applicant that gets applicant support compete in a contention set with an applicant that is not awarded applicant support or that has much more access to resources? And so ICANN presented a couple options of what a bid credit in an auction could look like versus setting some sort of, what do they call it, a set aside for applicants of applicant support. Very complex subject still being discussed and being discussed, I think, by the applicant support sub-team of the implementation review team to make sure that there's a fair process or some way to, enable applicants that get applicant support to more effectively compete for these strings that are contested. We'll go on to the next one. Next slide. The last session that was covered dealt with a continued discussion of the fees that we discussed in the first one, as well as how to keep as much predictability in the process of new gTLDs in general as possible. And the mechanism that was approved by the board as recommended by the sub-pro working group was the notion of this standing predictability implementation team, which we call SPIRIT, although it's pronounced SPIRIT. I'll say that. I know it's missing an I, but we like to call it SPIRIT because it sounds a lot better than SPIRT. If we can go on to the next slide. Jim discussed this resolution or at the beginning of this call, where ICANN board just prior to or the first day of the ICANN80 passed this resolution. But that resolution actually has a lot of impact on a number of other subjects in the new gTLD process, and we're all still kind of grappling with that resolution. So ICANN says, it does not want to, or that it wants to exclude, or that it must exclude content or any commitment that restricts content. And that's, that alone has a number of repercussions when you're dealing with GAC advice, because a lot of GAC advice is based on, or could be based on content-based issues. Certainly, we've been discussing it with the single plural, which I'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute, with changes to applications. Like if an applicant gets, if there's public comment and an applicant wants to revise its application based on public comment, what is it able to do in order to satisfy those public comments? It really has triggers on a lot of different other sections. And so that's what the IRT and others in the community are kind of grappling with right now, is everything that's impacted by that board resolution. If we go on to the next slide. No, one more, sorry. So in the singular plural issue, this is a pretty hot topic. The community during SubPro's work, whether it was the GNSO community, the ALAC community, the GAC community, it was pretty unanimous that the community were not happy with the fact that singulars and plurals of the same string in the same language were allowed to be delegated in the last round. That was kind of the opposite of what most people had thought would happen prior to the last round. And so it was pretty clear the community wanted to clarify that for this next round, that singulars and plurals not be allowed to both be delegated. And so what the SubPro team recognized is that there may be some exceptions where you could have words that may, or strings that may look like they're singular and plural of each other, but that they have completely different meanings, and that there should be some sort of exception process where there's an indifferent intended use. So the example we used back then in SubPro was the string spring and springs. So you could use, let's say, spring to have a TLD dedicated to the season of the year, flowers and all sorts of wonderful things that happen in spring. And you could have another TLD, springs, plural, that deals with the metal objects that are found in pretty much everything, computers and beds and cars, all sorts of metal contraptions. And that was the thinking in subpro. But now with this, the board didn't adopt it. And then, of course, it clarified that it did not want any restrictions based on content, which sort of kills this notion of intended use. And so now the small team plus of the GNSO Council is discussing how can we keep a single plural prohibition, but also allow for limited exceptions where those exceptions do not involve ICANN looking at content. And it's not easy. The discussions have been going okay, but they kind of hit some snags every now and then. But we hope that the small team will present something to the council in the next few weeks, and that hopefully it should get community support and go out to an implementation team to try to see if there's a way that we can still prohibit singles and plurals, but also have this limited exception where it's clear on its face that the singular and plural versions are aimed at different types of registrants. If we want to jump to the next slide. We talked about GAC advice. I think that was covered both in Jim and Alan's presentation. So I don't know if we have to discuss this, but
no, let's not. We're actually, we have half an hour. We have 17 minutes left and
so I will
35
stop.
minutes of stuff.
So that's it. I mean, we're working on a lot of topics, and look out for a new comment period probably this week on terms and conditions for the applicant support program and the RSP. And then you have the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll turn directly to Alan with an update on the registration directory request service.
Thank you. This is a relatively quick one. As I suspect people know by now, but I'll quickly review it. The registration data request service is a service to allow interested parties to request the release of redacted registration data. Because of privacy issues and a whole bunch of other things, a lot of the data that used to be available in WHOIS is no longer available. There are a number of reasons why someone might want and have a legitimate reason for getting such data, and the RDRS is as Jim mentioned, a 2-year program, pilot program, to hopefully learn something more about the process. And it is a voluntary program. That is, requesters don't have to use it. They can go through other mechanisms to go directly to registrars or registries, and registrars don't have to use it because, it was not implemented because of a specific PDP recommendation that was accepted, and therefore it is voluntary. Some registrars use it, some do not. There were 2 presentations at ICANN80 on this issue. One was put on by the registrar, by the GNSO Commercial Stakeholder Group, which talked about experiences, both requester and registrar experiences. There was another session that was put on by the Registrar Stakeholder Group, which was quite interesting. It was billed as how to do a good request, but the format was something different than what I was expecting in any case, and it consisted of specific requests, with names redacted, that registrars had actually received, and the participants in the group were divided into a number of small groups, sitting at round tables, and each of us looked at some of these requests, and essentially each of us decided, did the registrar make the right decision or not? It's quite an interesting session. I think it has some merit going forward. Of course, it was somewhat skewed because the registrars had the opportunity to present requests which presumably would put them in a good light. and therefore was not necessarily the requests that a requester who had been refused in their mind incorrectly would have presented. But nevertheless, it was an interesting session, and it was done in a rather unique way, which I think was quite beneficial. So there was, a lot of, again, we're learning more about the system. We still don't quite know exactly what we want to get out of it and how the 2-year program will provide us with enough information to make those decisions. And we're now 6 months into it. We're a quarter of the way through the 2-year program. The system was originally imagined as it would be implemented and run without change for 2 years. In fact, ICANN.org is being very flexible, and we are looking at changes both in terms of the information we get out of it and the metrics so that we can learn more from it. But we're also learning things about the system itself. We found out, among other things, that the original system might not be considered very friendly from some users' perspective, and therefore we're looking at making changes which might increase its usage. Same thing from a registrar point of view. So it's a learning experience. Whether we're learning enough to know how to make decisions at the end of it, I'm not sure, but it's an interesting project essentially to be involved of and to watch it change as it evolves. So they were good sessions. There's a general feeling we need more sessions like this. Exactly how to organize them so we're not running competing sessions at the same time it is going to require some discussion between now and the meeting in Turkey. But it is an interesting area, and those with an interest in in this kind of thing are encouraged to go to these sessions. And just it's an experiment, and therefore it's an interesting learning experience. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Alan. In the interest of time, I'm going to move Denise and myself to the end, and we may only have a few seconds each. And I'm going to turn directly to Laura Margolis for the CCNSO update. Laura, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. This is Laura Margolis for the records. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to participate in this readout. And I know we are running out of time, so I will try to do it shorter. I want to say that I am not a CCNSO counselor, but I am the ALAC liaison to the CCNSO. So I will not be speaking, just not representing the CCNSO. Regarding the ICANN meeting in Kigali, some of the resolutions there were that it was approved, the board report. The CCNSO Council resolved to approve the board report of the proposed policy on the deselection of the IDN CCTLD strings and related variants. That report includes the result of the votes of the CCNSO members, also the recommendations followed by the vote, and the final report which contains the proposed policy on the deselection of the IDN CCTLD strings and the related variants. Then going on some other decisions on the portfolio of activities, the CCNSO Council resolved to adopt the CCNSO 2-year rolling forward 25 and 26 for portfolio of the activities as the baseline for the CCNSO activities for the coming year, and requested the triage committee to review and update that portfolio quarterly. Then it was also the CCNSO resolved to adopt the proposed charter of the CCNSO Policy Gap Analysis Working Group, which has made a call of volunteers, and it is already approved by the Council. Also, there will be a new committee on the CCNSO, the onboarding and mentoring committee, which already launched a call for volunteers. And regarding call for volunteers, also the CCNSO made a call for appointed liaison to ALAC, appointed liaison to GNSO, and an appointee to the NOMCOM. Also, regarding the CSC, the CCNSO Council appointed Claudia Ruiz as the CSC selection process manager and adopted the timeline and proposed selection for the new appointed CCNSO members and alternate of the CSC. And the council launched a call for volunteers, which is closed already. There are some differences between what happened right next to the Kigali meeting and now after another council meeting. So there are different updates from the Kigali meeting and going on now. So then regarding the meeting in Kigali, there were two very interesting presentations on the CCTLD news sessions, one of the collaboration and partnerships in the CCTLD landscape, and also another one that was called a technical community coalition for multi-stakeholderism. Also, there was another session organized by AFTLD on the digitalization of South African public schools. And also there was another session organized by the IGLC, which is the Internet Governance Liaison Committee, called How CCTLDs Contribute to a Better World, which was exploring how the GDC and the WSIS +20 can accelerate progress towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the unique role of the CCTLDs that can play within this process. If you were not able to join these sessions, all the recordings are available, so you can find them there in the agenda. Also, there was another session of a new space for the CCNSO, which is a World Cafe, where the CCTLDs were meeting, discussing the improvements to the voting on the CCNSO, and also they managed to discuss some tools on how to encourage more CCTLDs participations within the CCNSO. Another group, new one, is the DASK, which is the DNS Abuse Standing Committee that has explored, we met during ICANN meeting in Kigali and explored the impact of the DNS abuse amendments that were implemented in the gTLD world within the Registrar Accreditation Agreement. There was a lot of exchange between the exchange of information between the different CCTLDs and their different practices. Well, thank you. This
Laura,
is
I think they have
for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laura.
Okay.
Laura.
Sorry, Greg, and
Laura,
thank you.
to
Bye.
Laurent Ferrali. More government stuff. High-level government meeting.
Thank you very much, Greg. Can you hear me well?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yes, thank you for the invitation. I know that we are running out of time, so I will be brief. But my presentation can be shared by my great colleagues from the policy team, and I am happy to answer to any question at the end of the session, after the session, or by email at laurent.ferrali@icann.org. So yes, thank you very much. I'm going to report about the GAC HLGM organized in the margin of the ICANN80 meeting. Thank you very much, Michelle. So in a nutshell, I mean, the HLGM is a very important ICANN meeting. We are supposed to organize with the GAC this meeting every 2 years. The aim of the HLGM, the main objective of the GM is to raise high-level political awareness about ICANN rules and activities in the broader internet governance space. And when I say ICANN rules, it's ICANN globally, not it's ICANN community, of course, ICANN org, etc. The HLGM is not a formal GAC meeting, so we are expecting high-level participation, and we are not expecting to discuss PDPs, ICANN PDPs. We are expecting to discuss more high-level issues connected to the global digital agenda, such as cybersecurity, digital divide, etc. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So yes, I'm going to be brief.
Oh, it looks like we've lost Laurent. Looks like he has disconnected. Okay.
Greg,
Take
you're
advantage
muted.
of that. Let's turn to Eduardo for 2 minutes on the SAC or 1 minute on the SAC.
Yes, I can do that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Basically, this purpose of this meeting, was really to discuss the interest between the, in collaboration between the SAC and ALAC. And during the meeting, there was a presentation about a cyber campaign that is basically a joint initiative between ALAC and the SAC to educate end users about cyber threats, and in particular in phishing. Ram Mohan underscored, during this talk about the collaboration spirit between the SAC and ALAC. And there was a presentation by Merik Kyle from SAC on credential management. There is an SAC document 174. I think this is wrong. I got it wrong here, but I think it's 174. Which provide best practices for protecting credentials used in the DNS system. Basically, they were talking about two-factor authentication and things like that. There was Yafit Akanho from ICANN, that discussed the training programs offered by ICANN, really, and he highlighted he highlighted the importance of disseminating best practices for credential management. He also encouraged the community to request training sessions to build capacity and awareness among various stakeholders. So that was about the security, safer cybersecurity campaign. And also there was a presentation by Matt Thomas from ESAC about name collision assessment project. The abbreviations here is NCAP, study 2, and this has to do with a name collision in different namespaces. And for those of you that do not know what name collision is, it occurs when a domain name used by a private or public within a network, a public entity, conflicts with a new domain publicly registered in the DNS. So that's what name collision is. And what happened before, there were a few top-level domains and everything was steady. It opened up, thousands of them, and started things happening with name collision. And they have documents that have been written about it. And the idea with the NCAP is to have a framework. So with new gTLDs, they will go through this process to find out there's collision before it gets delegated into the root. That's basically what that is. That is the NCAP. So
thank you, Eduardo. We're a minute over time.
That's it. That's it. Bye.
Well, thank you so much. In the interest of time, I will invite Denise to speak at next month's NARALO meeting, so that she can have all the time in the world. I'm just going to say, with regard to the IRP supplementary rules, that there is a comment period right now. So if you want to make a comment or see what it's about, go read the public comment page. Couple of rules are kind of perhaps controversial with regard to when it's too late to have an independent review process. You can look at the ICANN calendar to see when the next ICANN meetings are. And with that, I'm going to thank everyone for their presentations here. We can also have Laurent at the next NARALO meeting as well. Thank you, and this meeting must and is therefore adjourned.